Hello for a brief 17 years. A bright light shone and then disappeared again. That brilliant white light saved our spiritual life. It began around 1500 BCE, during a time when polytheism dominated and debates were at the forefront. The ascended masters decided something needed to be done and finally devised a plan. Thoth shared the following story with me. First of all, I would be happy if you liked and subscribed. As a first step, they decided to bring a being with Christ consciousness into a body that carried Christ consciousness, thus embedding the knowledge of Christ consciousness into the memory of the Akashic records. This had been lost during the fall. The body carrying Christ consciousness would be taller than those present on the planet at that time, and would serve as an example to humanity. This was the first part of the plan, a very clever step, and they did it. The ascended masters decided that the Christ-conscious individual should become the king of Egypt. To achieve this, they had to break all the rules, absolutely all of them. They went to the then reigning king Amenhotep II and made a request. Thoth physically entered the room, approached the king, and said, "I am Ren Thoth." I am sure the king found it very hard to believe. By that time, the Egyptians likely thought the Netters, divine beings, were mythical figures from stories. But one of the Netters was standing there as a real human. Thoth said, "We have a serious problem here in Egypt, and I need your help." Somehow, Thoth convinced Amenhotep II to do something no Egyptian king would ever do. Thoth said, "I don't want your son to become king. I want to place an external lineage on the throne of Egypt." Amenhotep II agreed. It must have been a truly significant experience. I don't know what Thoth did. He might have entered radiating light or walking on air. He must have done something to convince the king of its necessity. Once the king's permission was granted, the physical body had to be created. And this wasn't easy. ###the creation of Akhenaten and Nefertiti's bodies. How did they do it? They approached A and Tia, who were already quite old, and said, "We want you to have a child." To obtain immortal genes, they needed immortals. Immortals have different chromosome counts, 46 plus 2 instead of 44 plus 2. A and Tia agreed and had a child. The baby was given to Amenhotep II to become the next king. The child grew up and became Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III later paired with another individual, whether physically or interdimensionally, I do not know, nor do I know who this partner was. However, the pairing had to involve someone with a higher chromosome count. Eventually, the male child born from this union was known as Amenhotep IV. But this child is better known as Akhenaten. Meanwhile, A and Tia waited another generation and then had another child, a girl named Nefertiti. Nefertiti grew up alongside Akhenaten, and they later married. Since they shared the same lineage, they were technically siblings, similar to the story of Osiris, where siblings married to create a new life possibility. Akhenaten and Nefertiti eventually became the king and queen of Egypt. ###, a new reign and monotheism. For a time, Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten ruled the country together, two kings simultaneously, defying traditional rules. Meanwhile, they built a brand new city in the heart of Egypt called el-Amarna. How they located the exact center of the country is still unknown. Akhenaten placed a stone there inscribed with the words, "This is the center of the country." Today, even with our satellites, we could not achieve greater precision. The entire city was constructed from white stone. It was stunning, a futuristic marvel. Akhenaten and his father ruled from different locations, Thebes and Tel el-Amarna, until the father passed, making Akhenaten the sole ruler. He became the first pharaoh of Egypt. Prior to Akhenaten, there were only kings. A pharaoh, meaning what you will become, symbolized the future potential of humanity. Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their children were not entirely human. Depictions show Akhenaten as tall and slender, with a long neck, delicate hands, a high waist, wide hips, and thin legs. The Egyptians claimed this was due to a disease that deformed him, but this explanation fails to account for the fact that Nefertiti and their daughters exhibited the same traits. ###, a shift in religion and art. Akhenaten's primary goal was to dismantle occult religions and return Egypt to the worship of one god. Since people were accustomed to worshipping objects, he gave them a visible representation of God, the sun. This choice was deliberate. The sun could not be enshrined in a temple. He taught that prana, the life force, came from the sun, although prana actually exists everywhere in infinite amounts. Artistic depictions during this time were also transformed, emphasizing truth and realism over stylization. Akhenaten also instituted a moral revolution. His teachings emphasized absolute honesty, forbidding even clothing to conceal the body outside ceremonial occasions. Everything had to be transparent and true, reflecting the values of the el-Amarna, the deity of truth and justice. Akhenaten's downfall. Akhenaten's reforms were met with hostility. The priesthood, whose wealth and power were tied to polytheism, opposed him vehemently. The military resented his pacifist policies, which called for the withdrawal of Egypt's forces from foreign lands. Even the public, devoted to their small gods, turned against him. According to history, Akhenaten was poisoned by his enemies. However, Thoth's teachings suggest that Akhenaten drank a potion that placed him in a death-like state. He was sealed in a sarcophagus with a magical seal and remained there for nearly 2,000 years before ascending to higher realms. #legacy and the Essenes. Despite his removal, Akhenaten's teachings lived on. He established a mystery school called the Law of One, where he trained 300 individuals in the path of spiritual evolution. These teachings later influenced the Essene community, a group that included Mary, the mother of Jesus. Akhenaten's work laid the foundation for future spiritual transformations. Akhenaten's 17 years were a flash of divine light, a pivotal moment embedding Christ consciousness into the collective memory of humanity. See you soon. Stay healthy.